In Brussels, they're worried about the very air we breathe. They want laws to protect the health of Europe's 370 million citizens, old and young. No one, you'd think, could argue with that. But this is Brussels.
We know we're dealing with one of the nastiest diseases we know about here. It's a very low probability disease. It's leukemia.
There's still a closed meeting that concerns this gentleman.
We're a very tiny little country with not as much industry as a lot of other places.
One industry, two people.
All our heads are his, yours and mine are on the block if we don't get it.
Lynn Edwards is Welsh. After 10 years in industry, she got bored. She became a civil servant, and now she's seconded to the Commission, the European Civil Service in Brussels.
In order to become a UK civil servant, you've got to believe in the rule of democracy, and they go to a lot of trouble to make sure you do. It wouldn't be a good thing to pursue your own agenda. You're not going to do a good job here unless you feel comfortable with there being a European project. Not to say you've got to be comfortable with all the details of it, but you do have to believe that it's your job to work for them, whoever they are. And here, to do a good job, you do have to think that a European project is a worthwhile thing.
Lynn has spent 3 years as an expert in the European Commission. She's drafted the proposal to enforce clean air standards into the first decade of the next century. 5 years ago, official statistics showed how dirty the air had become. Anxious electorates nagged nervous politicians that something must be done. Now Europe has to agree what to do, when, and how much it'll cost. Over the next 12 months, our camera will follow the intimate and agonizing gestation of a piece of European law from conception to delivery. It's January. At the Commission, Lynn has a new boss.
Music. There's a CD. I can play music.
Grant Lawrence has a brief to master, and quickly. Welcome to the world of the pollution particle.
Yes. My second likes Billie Holiday, and I can't stand Billie Holiday, so she gets the Pastoral Symphony loud in the morning. Right.
Now the big one, the difficult one.
Particulates, therefore.
Yes. Particulate matter is emitted by almost everything that people do, really. Mm-hmm. Research started a few years ago in the United States, measuring changes in daily levels of particulate matter, measuring asthma attacks, other respiratory symptoms, hospital admissions, and daily death rates. And they found that all these measures were higher on days when concentrations of particles were higher. Yeah. It's got a lot of public attention. Parliament will be wanting to drive hard. The member states want to do everything that can be done.
Everything in Brussels goes at consensus pace, committee speed. All 15 member states must agree or compromise. Defining the quality of air from the Arctic Circle to the Eastern Mediterranean is legislation on an heroic scale. It would tax the powers of a totalitarian superstate. But Europe is a family of quarrelsome democracies. Before harmony can be achieved, a working group of Brussels-based civil servants from the governments of 15 separate member states must first agree what each country can achieve. Chairing the working group, British civil servant Pete Betts.
Could there be a little bit less talking in the room? I hope you've all washed behind your ears because the camera's coming round the back of us.
Pete is the UK representative, UKREP in the unlovely jargon of Brussels. A Briton chairs the meeting because in the first half of 1998, Britain holds the presidency of Europe.
Okay, the document that you should have in front of you this morning, colleagues, is document number 12718/97. That's the Commission proposal for a daughter directive on sulfur dioxide, oxides of nitrogen, particulate matter and lead in ambient air. there are 15 member states, and like in school, we take turns to be in charge. And we each get 6 months to do it. So the United Kingdom became the president on 1st of January 1998. On 30th of June 1998, will stop being president, and Austria, who's currently sitting there, will move round one place and take this chair and become the presidency. We, the United Kingdom, won't be the presidency again for 7 years.
At the European Parliament, the Clean Air proposal already has a rapporteur, an MEP who keeps communication open between Parliament and the bureaucrats. Anita Pollock will be the parliamentary godmother to this legislation.
We've just been having a preliminary briefing, so take your coats off and...
Oh, we can tell us what it's all about as well. What's that? Is that the...
It's the explanatory
I read that on the
memorandum.
train this morning.
Oh, you do? Oh, well, that's very, very brave of you. I've never consulted ACREP before on a piece of work that I've been doing. So, you see, you're very honoured now that we've got a Labour government. Consulting ACREP is the done thing.
Clearly, negotiations in the group are confidential, so
you wouldn't put a finger on it.
we will be as open as possible in order to help the process along.
It is, I think, a very important piece of legislation. So it's important not to kind of, you can't do it off the top of your head. This one, it's got to be done with, the proper input from industry and and the other kind of players.
It's also very politically sensitive in all member states.
It is. Everyone's wanting to reduce motorised traffic, but nobody wants to spend the money on public transport.
No one wants to tell people they can't use their cars.
Well, that's right.
South West London is Anita Pollock's Euro constituency. If she pilots the measure through successfully, it'll help her chances of being picked for a seat at the next election when they change the voting system.
You give that a good shove behind you, last one.
The constituency is also a useful laboratory for first-hand research into dust, grime and pollution.
I think actually this hill would be a good spot for an air pollution monitoring, because it is always clogged with traffic. Day and night, weekends, the lot.
For some time, the local authority has been monitoring air quality in the constituency.
And so this has been going how long now?
Only a couple of months. We've had a number of air quality monitoring stations around the borough, and what's different about this compared with the previous ones, we're measuring particulate matter as well.
Particulates. That's the dust that Brussels will have to regulate. Not all dust. Dust a fraction of the diameter of a human hair, 10 microns small.
PM10, that's based on the sampling head.
So that's what's in our lungs, this nice black stuff.
Yeah, to a degree. It remains suspended for long periods in the air, and also it can bypass the various filtering mechanisms of the nose, sinuses, larynx, and get further down.
Government are requiring now land use planners and transport engineers to come into the equation, and in the future they will be looking and having to make an assessment of what effect their decisions are going to make on air quality.
Essentially, the implementation is going to be twofold. First, manufacturers of both vehicles and polluting industries are going to have to tighten up their acts. Now, they're going to have to do that under various other laws as well, so the whole thing is working very much as a package. But at the real implementation level for the monitoring and measuring and alert systems and all the rest of it for air pollution, it's really essentially going to be local authorities who have to do most of the work.
January the 20th. And the cloudless skies over Brussels issue a warning to the lawmakers below. There's no wind, dust and gases are trapped in the stagnant air, giving politicians sore throats, itchy eyes, and a necessary sense of urgency to get on with the job of cleaning up the air.
I would advise you to take those two names out this dinner there.
It's the eve of a crucial meeting with the all-nation working group. The Commission needs to fine-tune its strategy.
I assume that the overall line I need to take for the Council Working Group is, which is tomorrow.
It's tomorrow, right?
Yeah. is that the Commission's aim is the highest possible standards of protection of public health. There could be no compromise on matters of public health. That therefore we don't change a full stop or a comma.
At least in the initial meetings, you have to maintain and defend the level of protection. But you don't from that say that you can't change a single comma.
No. I mean, my natural inclination is to defend the Commission's proposals strongly, but to say that if there is new information... Yes,
that's not only your natural inclination, that's your duty.
Yeah, but let's just... I know that. The way I would do things is to defend the proposals strongly, but to say if there is new information to be considered, then of course it will be considered.
Is this the first time you've done either of these institutions?
Yes.
Ah.
Lynn will present the Commission's proposal to the working group National Civil Servants from all Europe's member states. It's her first big test, and the first big test here of the Clean Air proposal. This is the arena where the Commission's careful plans for Europe's air will be thrown to the lions of national self-interest.
Have you seen that the Germans are already here? Usually they have their towels spread out across the desks.
Discussions of the working group are confidential, the dealing's always done in secret. But this time, delegates have voted to allow our camera in. Britain, as president, is chairing the meeting, but Lynn can expect no favours from the impartial chair.
Well, good morning, colleagues, and welcome to this cavernous room, not the usual intimacy of our group. I'm pleased to say we have interpretation into all 11 community languages today. It would be useful if the Commission could just talk us through the reporting to the public obligations contained in the Framework Directive and how they apply.
First decision, how much the public actually need to know about the air they're breathing.
What the Commission is proposing is that information should be regularly supplied to the public, just as a matter of course, no matter what the concentrations of pollution are, and the Commission knows that many member states are doing this already anyway. The Commission thinks that this is a valuable thing to do.
There would be no specific obligations in relation to informing the public unless you introduce this concept of the public information indicator. Is that right?
The Commission is of the view that under the objectives of the Framework Directive there is an obligation to inform the public about these pollutants, but that unless we elaborate on it, it's completely open to interpretation what that obligation is.
Thanks very much. I understand it now.
The reason really that I came to Brussels to do this piece of work is that I was working on this legislation from the UK point of view. The Commission needed somebody who could pick up the work quickly, so it had to be somebody who knew what was happening, and I did. So I was working with Pete Betts. I was coming along to Council Working Group. He was representing the UK, and I was acting as his technical expert.
Let's move to Article 5. The floor is open.
Article 5 deals with the most damaging pollutants in the air, the particulates. From exhaust emissions to airborne sand, particulates come in many forms, and so do the reservations about what size of particulate to control. In Eurospeak, the limit values.
We have a general scrutiny reservation on this article. Last time we said that we have serious problems with particulate matter because of our lack of experience.
When we discussed the annexes, we saw very clearly that just about all member states have difficulties with the particulate values and how they are to be determined, and that is just reflected in the text.
We have zones where this problem could arise, and they are all over the Iberian Peninsula. This is a goes because of winds from the Sahara. Canary Islands are affected, and we have practically an invasion of sand every year.
During the winter, we have to use winter sanding on roads. Now, this winter sand and also the use of tires, winter tires with studs, cause some problems.
For 2 days, the 15 nations chip away at the Commission's proposal. But at the end of it, Lynn is sticking to the Commission's guns.
Right, thank you. How long have we got? 5 minutes. Why should we have limit values? Because we're dealing with a pollutant which probably has the greatest effect on human health of any of the pollutants listed in Directive 96/62/EC. And because we need to start tackling it seriously as quickly as we can. And because the mechanism in the Framework Directive is that one sets a limit value and then makes action plans to meet that limit value.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was very clear. Does anybody want to react to anything the Commission has said? Thank you very much. See you at 3. Have a good lunch. Negotiations typically last months as we go through the proposal. First of all, we'll typically have a general discussion, and then we'll go through a legislative proposal article by article. And as negotiations proceed, United Kingdom will get some of its points it will realise it's not going to get.
After the Marathon Inquisition, Lynn reports to her immediate superior, Prudencio Pereira. If the Commission is to deliver limit values on pollution backed by the force of law, rather than looser target values with no legal status, it has a struggle on its hands.
Right, a strange meeting. Not very free-flowing. Now, we had a lot of debate again on the natural dusts problem. Spain simply doesn't want limit values, and neither does Greece.
Because of lack of accurate data?
Yes, that's right. Greece says very simply and clearly that they just like to have target values. Spain floats different things, but essentially they don't want limit values. Although the presidency didn't ask me to comment on levels of limit values, they did ask me specifically, did we need limit values? I said very firmly that we did. There were some quite strong voices in support, so my feeling is we will end up with limit values.
The first day you were by yourself, no?
The environment group I did entirely on my own. But it's hard work.
And were you able to explain or on the bilateral or about our staff difficulties or something like that?
Well, the Belgians said I must be very brave. No, I mean, most people are already aware that we've got a lot of posts empty. Yes, I mean, I was wondering, in fact, whether the fact that I was on my own was one of the things that wasn't making the meeting flow. But the presidency said they couldn't make as many jokes at the Commission's expense because it would have looked like victimisation.
Lynn's department is understaffed. But in Brussels, there's no shortage of professionals to help, harass or hinder the progress of the legislation. 20,000 people work for the Commission, Europe's central civil service. Every member state has its own permanent staff to keep an eye on them. 626 MEPs, each with their own assistants and researchers, struggle to keep bureaucracy accountable. And just in case anyone's short of an opinion, the lobbyists stream in every day to bend Brussels' individual and collective ear. In Brussels, Euro MP Anita Pollock has to get to grips with the responses, or lack of them, to the clean air proposals.
Hi everybody, how's the universe?
Very well.
Good, good. How's it going? Any responses from local government?
They haven't got time.
They haven't got time? Oh well, let's hope they've got time to do the measuring they want them to do that.
It seems everyone's slightly woken up. They're now actually politically considering this.
Yeah.
And it's sort of dawned on them that they are going to have huge problems reaching any of these targets.
I think this is going to be one of those things that everyone's going to wake up to the week before the plenary, and we'll have all hell.
Yeah, well, we've sorted it by then.
Yeah. I'll get all the Green amendments on my back, and then I'll get, you know, German elections coming up. The Germans want to be as green as the Greens, or if not greener, and they're going to want to go for the best possible greeny line and hang the realities. The British governments will be leaning on me saying, you know, excuse us, but we're in the real world here, and you've got to toe the line.
There's trouble about the size of pollution dust Brussels wants to regulate. The Commission wants limits on dust particles as small as 10 microns, PM10s. But some states think the only real danger comes from particles that are smaller still, and there's a further, dustier problem.
Spain in particular made the point that there was still uncertainty about particulates, that the science wasn't clear, and that we shouldn't set any standard, essentially, for particulates until the science became clear. I have on the list Spain, please.
Now, we are concerned with health matters, and I think health is very much connected to PM 2.5. And we think that it is slightly awkward for us to measure the PM10 since we are concerned with the P2.5.
Thank you very much. Spain.
In the mind of some member states, they cannot understand your problem because they have not your environment. They cannot imagine what means a tropical or a sandy storm, because they never had it. And you try to explain, and well, they think that probably you are looking for a bypass, or you are trying to exaggerate the problem in order to get some other goals.
Behind the scenes, the British chair seeks compromise. Is the Commission determined to stick to the 10-micron yardstick?
If you reduce PM10, do you automatically reduce PM 2.5?
Usually. People are now starting to look at smaller particles, and some of the health effects seem to be more strongly linked to the smaller particles.
But is it possible that it is the case that PM10 is not harmful to health or hazardous to health?
It is not safe to say that the stuff between 2.5 and 10 is not harmful to health.
The smaller the particle, the further into the lung it's able to go.
Yeah, but the reason I'm is this starts to open up this whole question of the Spanish problem. What are we doing now? Spain is saying, as far as we can understand from the Commission, PM 2.5 is a problem, not really PM10. But because you don't know very much about PM 2.5, you're proposing this big, heavy obligation on PM10, and that's stupid. What you should do is propose some kind of target value, non-binding target value, gather more information, and then propose a limit value once you know more. Ilario has been on the phone to me, and he said, you know, why are we doing this? How can you justify requiring member states to spend millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of pounds, I don't know what it is, you know, when we don't even know that PM10 is a problem?
In the Commission's view, there's enough evidence on PM10 that we shouldn't just sit around and do research and not set about seriously trying to reduce concentrations. The Commission thinks that reducing PM10 is a safe option, but you need to try to ensure that you're not heading into something which might even make things worse. So it would not, for example, reducing concentrations of PM10 by burning or otherwise reducing the big particles to smaller ones.
Cleaning up the air doesn't come cheap. Healthier lungs for European citizens could cost industry £1.5 billion a year. Industry doesn't think this is a price it, or ultimately its customers, should pay.
Right, nice to meet you. And hello.
Please take your
For the lobbyists, the clean air proposal is politically idealistic and economically naive.
Let me maybe say in 2 words who is UNICE and what we're doing. So UNICE is the official voice for business and industry vis-à-vis the European institutions.
The way in which WHO come up with their criteria or their guidelines for air quality is based on risk assessment, where they just look at the health implications. They don't look at different ways in which you can manage risks.
So you need to say to yourself, as a responsible individual within the legislature, are there other allocations that you can make for those funds, perhaps in improved public housing, perhaps in improved diet, or whatever, to achieve the same public health ends? Now, that will come out of a good cost-benefit analysis, and indeed the SO2 work group proposed a number of ranges of values based upon WHO, and it was our expectation that the consultants employed very hastily, I might add, by the Commission, would consider, but they didn't.
Even so, this legislation isn't going to be heavily lobbied. Industry isn't comfortable being seen to oppose these environmental measures which won't directly affect them.
How many people are dying? Is it 20 or is it 20,000? Or is it more? And it is more. And what's the policy response? Oh, we can't do it. The industries might be harmed. Well, let's get things in a rational perspective here. There is a huge problem, and it needs addressing, and it needs addressing quickly. And if that hurts industry, then that hurts industry. It's an unusual approach that's been adopted in this particular piece of legislation, in that there's been a fair and balanced access to the policy process for NGOs and industry, which has meant that industry has had one voice and one voice only, and it has meant that they have not been able to manipulate the assessment process in the same way as they have had success, for example, in the auto-oil process. So, of course, they're now going to cry foul and say this isn't fair, but it is based on good, solid science.
The motor trade says it's gone a long way to reduce emissions. The message is relayed through less direct but traditional Brussels channels.
I think that if you look at the change that's taken place in the internal combustion engine, the emissions that these vehicles produce are not very far off the detection capability of the analyzers. The rate of progress over the last 10 years has been astonishing.
Do you think that rate can be continued?
No. I think it gets increasingly difficult. Industry has done all the easy things. They've gone. Now it's... And if you look at the emissions that are left, I mean, 95% of the emissions being cured, what have we got left? We're working on smaller and smaller margin.
Member states are all technically very knowledgeable about this proposal.
In advance of the March Council of Environment Ministers, Lynn has to brief her commissioner, Rit Bjerregaard, on what's been happening in the All-Nations Civil Service Working Group. The commissioner herself will have to defend the proposal in council.
Your message needs to be that public information is an absolutely key part of this proposal. The public has to have information they can trust.
I think it's very important that we concentrate in my speech during the public debate on the information and the access to information. I think it could be an interesting debate if any minister will say publicly that they don't want information to the citizens. No, it's not very likely.
15905. It's March already. Environmental ministers from member states converge on Brussels to see how far the working group has cleared the ground and what tough political decisions still need to be taken.
UK 2252 is clear to land runway 02, surface wind 06,
The British want the measure agreed by June, when their turn at the presidency ends. Success will underline Britain's European commitment in Brussels, and at home it'll add a green tinge to the Blair government. Politicians in the Council of Ministers have the ultimate power, but Europe's civil service has already defined the options and limited the agenda for discussion. Even so, this is where the deals are done, and almost always done behind closed doors. In a rare gesture towards glasnost, cameras are allowed to witness this debate, but delegates have been warned.
I'm now turning to item 10 on the agenda, the Air Quality Daughter Directive. I would remind colleagues that we're now being televised. I'm sure it is quite normal experience for my colleagues around the table to have this experience, which is always an enjoyable one, and that it will not in any way influence their behaviour.
This is a significant proposal. Many people will live longer and far more will have fewer health problems once the directive has been adopted. I would also like to stress that public information is one of the key elements if we are to secure cleaner air in the community.
Can I now call France?
Thank you, President. My turn has come to express thanks to the Commission. On measurements of particulate matter, there are greater difficulties here because reliable techniques, reproducible techniques for management...
The French, not for the first time in matters European, are about to pull a surprise.
But we do feel that we do need to determine quality objectives and target values right now.
Quite unexpectedly, the French declare they want targets to aim at, rather than legal limits to be set. Siding with the sandier southern states, France has shifted the balance of power.
Well, after every meeting, I report to the hierarchy in DG11, the officials, Prudencio and so on, but also to the Commissioner. Though I don't contact the Commissioner directly, she has a group of advisors who work for her. I write a report like this one, same evening if I can, so that they all know what was discussed, what the outcome was, and what the big issues are for the next round of negotiations.
Lynn goes back to the British chair of the working group for a damage assessment after the French intervention.
I refuse to panic, since I always expected a lot more people to be saying they wanted target values than have been so far anyway. France suggested, and this is the first time they've said this, that limit values for particles shouldn't be agreed now. We should do more research, and they particularly said that there are a lot of problems with measurement, that we don't really know how to measure particles. That we should do more research and fix limit values in 2003. Now, I think I know what's happening there. I've since learned that the French have just gone out and apparently spent a lot of money on the sort of monitoring equipment that underreads.
Particulates aren't the only pollutants Brussels wants to limit. The World Health Organization, WHO, has safe limit guidelines for benzene. Petrol contains up to 5% of benzene, and benzene can cause cancers. Now the Commission must choose limits. Lynn's involved in this proposal too. The Italians are responsible for drafting the proposed limits. Already behind schedule, they summon a meeting of international scientific experts to assess the risks of benzene.
Shut the door. Dr. Allegrini here is the leader of the working group on benzene. They have asked for extra advice. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide that advice. And it's to provide advice on the risks associated with benzene.
Needless to say, defining the acceptable risk can be something of a stumbling block, as no two countries seem to be able to agree. And certainly in my experience, it's very difficult to get anybody to put on record, particularly in front of cameras like this, what their view is of how many leukemia cases a year are acceptable.
What you're getting from the Pliafilm unit risk analysis, unit risk estimate, is a predicted slope with benzene on the x-axis and leukemia on the y-axis. Now that slope is derived from exposure data which is of relatively high concentrations. And what you're trying to do with that high concentration data is say how risky lower concentrations are.
Then I have the feeling that, yeah, somewhere in the range of 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 7, there is a figure which might be used to see, okay, if we have specific concentrations in ambient air to which people are exposed continuously, chronically, what might be the actual risk for the general population?
We have a large study in a refinery population that doesn't show effects, and we have other case control studies in distribution workers exposed to about 1 part per million, half a part per million, that doesn't show effects.
If you do give me a range of uncertainty, I shall certainly want to know how we arrived at the ends of the range.
A great deal of it does depend on that magic phrase, expert judgment. It's difficult to explain in scientific terms what expert judgment means. I feel it more than I can explain it. It's when you look round the table and you know people are unhappy about a number, and you look round the table again and you know they're reasonably happy about another number, and you just feel that they're drifting towards a figure. And the range that I'm going to provide is not any one that any of you have suggested exactly, but it is a compromise between what you have all suggested. And that is that it should be that 4.4 times 10 to the minus 6, which is the extreme end of the WHO figure, and at the other end, 1 times 10 to the minus 8. That's a range of, and I'm not very good at these things, what's that, 50 is it? It's 50, is it?
No, it's 25.
500.
It's 2 hours.
In such circumstances, it seems risk assessment can be as much an art as a science. The fate of European legislation may hang on a decimal point.
So it's 50, yeah, right.
It's 50.
I've scored that 10 to minus 8.
Sorry, can I just change the sum? It's 5 times 10 to the minus 6 to 1 times 10 to the minus 8. What's that?
Well, I can see.
Is 100. But some people believe it should only be 10.
We will come out with a recommendation.
That's right.
Then the Commission will make the proposal, and the proposal will go to the Member States. So
Correct.
there is this step in between.
But the Commission will follow, I guess, your recommendation, because what other group have they got to improve on it?
It takes a deadline to galvanize a bureaucracy, and work is falling behind schedule on chemical pollutants. No one in the Brussels Commission ever seems to get a rocket, but Jim Curry, Chief Civil Servant for the Environmental Directorate, gives his team the closest thing to it.
We've got 3 items scheduled on the Commission's 1998 programme, 2 of which are related to air quality. The CO2 directive and the benzene directive. Grant, could you give us a rundown on precisely why there's likely to be delay?
The existing air quality daughter directives are going through the Council. The one person
who's dealing with them at the moment, is pretty much engaged full-time on getting the existing proposals through and can't devote any of her time to getting the proposals on CO and benzene prepared. That particular problem can be solved, I think, when we have solved the recruitment problem. That's not a recruitment problem. We have 2 posts vacant in D3, one of which will be attributed to this file. The way these texts are prepared is that they're prepared by outside consultants. It is an outside consultant whom we employ for CO, and for Italy it's benzene. So we will have to think of, I will have to ensure that and the Italians are far behind. We have to see where they're behind and why they're behind and what we can do to speed them up.
What you're saying is that the Italians who at the moment are doing the preparatory work on benzene have definitely slipped behind.
I'm going to Italy to see the Minister of the Environment anyway, but about water.
Right.
But do you want me to raise air there, or would you rather you did that yourself?
No, I think what we might do is for me to write to them, saying that you're coming and that you will raise the question so that they're actually prepared and get their act together.
The Council Working Group meets again. Civil servants from some member states are choking on the issue of fine dust. Finland, for instance, and the sand used in winter to grit their winter roads.
The presidency proposal was that we should include the winter sand here in the article.
If we do end up with a separate way of dealing with it, delegations might want to say something like all reasonable measures should be taken to abate the impact of road sanding.
Solid enough to begin with, the sand soon grinds down into a fine dust, which blows about in a way which would breach the proposal. So Finland wants a derogation or exemption to allow them to continue the practice after the legislation comes into force. As good environmentalists, Finland is rather embarrassed at having to continue to press the point.
Please don't laugh. It's about our very specific problem on the road sanding. I understand it doesn't fit to the new wording now, so we have to come up with some new wording on this.
France, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. We'd like to specify the reference to France in point 4. Here it says that France considers that the values will be difficult to achieve by a certain date. We would like to have a target value. It would be 50 micrograms per cubic metre.
Il s'agit de la valeur journalière.
That's a daily value. And this value would go hand in hand with a review clause, i.e. a review in 3 years' time.
Thank you, France. Just to be clear, it's a target value in 2005. Does that mean that you don't believe that there should be a limit value set at this stage for 2010 either?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Oui, ça me semble. Yes, I think it's premature to look beyond 2005. Thank you.
Once again, France and the sandier, dustier nations of the south want mere targets and not limits set. And with the Finns anxious about road gritting, the alliance of northern states is at risk. Diplomacy is needed. Pete Betts needs to rally support.
We want to keep limit values for 2005. Maybe we'll stick a few more exceedances in or something as a compromise. But we hope that you'll support us in maintaining a limit value for 2005, not just a guide value.
Okay.
2010, there's quite a large number of member states. So we had thought one option would be for us to put in a target level for 2010. What would you think about that?
Yeah.
There is nothing you particularly want in terms of weakening the numbers, is there?
No, not weakening.
You want strengthening some of them,
yeah.
except for the winter sand.
Which Sweden doesn't need, of course.
No,
actually,
David, we don't want a derogation. We're not that keen of a derogation because of the health aspects in winter sanding.
Well, why does Finland want it if you don't want it?
I don't know, ask Finland.
Aren't you worried about the people breaking their legs or people crashing their cars?
Of course.
But you have exceedances also.
Yeah, but they all drive around in Volvos, huge Volvos, so
They're safe anyway.
Streets, that's the reason.
So when
they are
they
so much richer.
when they crash, they're all right.
Yeah.
Yes,
It
they
gives
are so
them-
much richer.
No, but I suppose that, yeah, but I suppose that we want, maybe we hope that we will be able to manage anyway.
But we are more honest.
Yeah,
That's
there
our
we go.
problem. That's our problem.
Yeah, that's the Finnish problem.
We think it's our problem.
Okay.
That was very blunt. Vice Finland. There's Sweden.
Yeah, but otherwise on the values.
Yeah.
Just
We're going to have to modify some of them.
Yeah.
So anything you would have particular problems with?
But we'll have a problem with all weakenings, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But
Because of where you are. It's easy for you, is it?
Yeah, well, no, not all of them. They're not easy for us, all of them. But we like them.
All bureaucracies can smell trouble when it's looming, and the sense of smell in Brussels is highly developed. The proposal to limit atmospheric benzene is now a full year behind schedule. Parliament will want to ask the Commission why. The Commissioner will ask her staff who's to blame, and the staff has got an uneasy feeling that if they're not careful, it'll be them.
Listen, let's go back to the policy group, where, again, I got hell for your work plan.
Not delivered, yeah.
And I know there's a lot, that you have a lot of priorities. I mean, you have a lot of priority areas. But the one area where we will get absolute hell if we don't deliver is the two texts that we have on the... Yeah, and we simply have to get them out, because if we don't, there are only 3 proposals, your 2 plus electronic waste. Electronic waste is now definitively into 1999. If we don't get our 2 out, or more or less finished by the end of 98, she'll go through the roof, the Commissioner, and she'll be right.
Okay.
I'm very concerned that this work on CO and benzene begin. And incidentally, sorry to this, I come back to it now. You told me that CO and benzene are following the usual way of lead countries. Have you kicked the Italians up the backside?
Yeah. We are working as well with the Italians, yeah.
Who is it in Italy?
Well, the Minister of Environment.
Okay, well, I'm seeing him...
The General Director
I'm seeing him tomorrow. Can you give me a file so that I can raise it with him?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
You're seeing whom?
I'm seeing both the Minister and the Director General tomorrow on water. But Kari has said that I have to raise this with him.
The easiest thing would probably be to find some excuse to let it to a consultant and let Italy get out of it.
Yeah, but wait a second, that gives, as far as I see, 2 problems. Firstly, the money to let it to a consultant. Have you got that? No. Secondly, the time. I mean, if we're going to get this thing on the Commission's table, as we've said we are, by December 1998...
What we need is 30,000 acres.
Well, and we need it now. I mean, you need to get something on the... getting to go in one end of the tunnel now. I'm just being bureaucratic and pig-headed.
Yes.
CO and benzene are on our thing for this year. All our heads, all our heads are his, yours, and mine are on the block if we don't get it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's visible, it's in Parliament, and the Commissioner will rightly get hell from Parliament if she doesn't do it. So I think we will just simply have to live through this year, and next year we'll have a cast iron case to put to him, because we'll be able to show him that we've all had nervous breakdowns as a result.
Next week, danger, democracy at work. Parliament tables its amendments to the Commission's plan.
Well, yeah, it's much tougher, great, terrific. Portugal, Ireland, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain and Germany all would have enormous problems meeting it.
Lynn goes to Rome to help the Italians. And Chairman Pete tries to sweep some of that troublesome dust under the diplomatic carpet.
I'll offer Spain a deal. He can have the words in the footnote, and then we'll forget about the pulverized seawater.